He walked away from me for someone better without ever looking back. That was the part that stayed with me the longest. Not the leaving itself, but the ease of it. The way he packed his things without a long conversation, without the kind of goodbye that 9 years deserved. He just went. And I stood in the apartment we had picked out together, holding a coffee mug with both his name and mine written on it in permanent marker, wondering how something that permanent could disappear so completely. I told myself I would be fine. I said it out loud, actually, standing in the kitchen the day after he left. I said, "You will be fine, Emily. The way you speak to a child who has fallen off a bike." I said it like if I used enough conviction, my body would believe it before my mind caught up. For a while the words were hollow. For a while I walked through my days like someone moving through water, slow and heavy and always slightly behind. But then something shifted. And by the time Ryan came back, standing at my door with regret all over his face, I was not the woman he had left. I was someone he no longer had the right to reach. My name is Emily. I am 32 years old, and up until about a year ago, I measured my life in terms of us. Everything was filtered through that lens. Our apartment, our plans, our future. I worked as a project manager at a mid-sized marketing firm, a job I was good at but never in love with. I kept it because it was stable, and stable was what our life needed while Ryan was still building his. I was the one who meal prepped on Sundays so we didn't overspend. I was the one who tracked the savings account, who remembered every bill, who quietly went without new clothes for 2 years so we could put more money toward his dream. I didn't think of any of it as sacrifice at the time. That's the thing about love. When it's real, or when you believe it's real, the giving doesn't feel like loss. Feels like investment. It feels like laying bricks toward something that will one day stand tall enough for both of you to live inside. I was building something. I believed that completely. What I didn't know was that Ryan had stopped building with me long before the day he sat across from me and said, "I need more than this." Ryan and I met when we were both 23. He was working at a small startup that was bleeding money, and I was fresh out of university with 2 part-time jobs and more ambition than sense. We had nothing. Our first apartment had a broken radiator and a landlord who returned calls once a month on a good week. We ate dinner on a second-hand table with mismatched chairs and laughed about it. We saved for a proper couch for 8 months and celebrated the day it arrived like it was a national holiday. Those early years were genuinely happy. I know that now without bitterness. They were real. The laughter was real. The love, at least for a while, was real. Ryan was sharp and driven and funny in that quiet, dry way that made me feel like I was always in on a joke no one else could hear. He had ideas that seemed impossible and the confidence that made you believe the impossible was coming. I believed in him before anyone else did. I believed when his own mother told him he needed a backup plan. I believed when his first pitch meeting went so badly he didn't speak for 2 days. I was there. Every single time I was there. The business started 3 years into our relationship. Ryan had an idea for a logistics consultancy, streamlining supply chains for small and medium businesses that couldn't afford the big firms. It was a smart idea. The kind you could feel was right even before the numbers proved it. The problem was startup money. We had very little. I had a small savings account built quietly since my first job, $12,000, meant for emergencies and futures. Ryan needed seed money to register the company, build a website, and cover his first 3 months without a salary. I gave it to him. All of it. Without hesitation and without a contract, because we were us, and us didn't need paperwork. His mother thought I was foolish. My sister asked if I was sure. I was completely sure. I told them both that I believed in Ryan the way you believe in things that are bone deep and beyond argument. We shook hands over the kitchen table as a joke, then kissed, then ordered takeout to celebrate. That night felt like the beginning of everything. Looking back now, I think it was also, very quietly, the beginning of the end. But I didn't know that yet, and I was happy, and we stayed up late making plans. The business grew faster than either of us expected. Within 18 months, Ryan had 6 clients. Within 3 years he had 20. He hired his first employee, then a small team. He moved the operation out of our spare bedroom and into a real office with his name on the window. I was proud of him. Deeply, genuinely proud. But somewhere in that climb, the version of Ryan who ate dinner with me on mismatched chairs began to fade. He started working later, coming home quieter, looking at his phone during conversations like he was already somewhere else. He started talking about people he was meeting through the business, investors, consultants, clients with money and polish. He started using words like personal brand in ways that had nothing to do with the company and everything to do with himself. I noticed the shift. I tried to talk about it twice, and both times he said I was overthinking. He said I was too comfortable. He said growth was uncomfortable and I needed to understand that. I took those words and turned them over for months, trying to figure out whether he was talking about himself or about me. In the end, I think he was talking about both of us. I just wasn't ready to hear it that way. Charlotte arrived in our lives like something imported, polished, expensive, and completely out of place in the world Ryan and I had built. She was a client. Her family ran a regional import business, and they needed consultancy help with their logistics. Ryan handled the account personally. He started mentioning her name in the small, careful way people do when they are trying not to mention someone too much. Charlotte has an interesting model. Charlotte's team does things differently. I heard her name 7 times in 2 weeks before I started counting. I wasn't suspicious at first. I was just paying attention. He came home later on the nights he met with her team. I asked once, directly, if something was happening. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read and said, "Nothing is happening. Stop looking for problems that don't exist." I believed him for another 3 months. I shouldn't have. But the truth is that when you have given someone 9 years and $12,000 and every quiet Sunday of your life, you want very badly to believe them. You need the story to make sense. You need the person you chose to be the person you thought they were. So I believed him. And then he left. He told me on a Thursday in October, late afternoon, the sky doing that early dark thing it does in autumn. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I got home from work. He had made tea, which he never did, and that was the first sign something was wrong. People make tea when they need something to hold. He said he had been thinking. He said the relationship had run its course. He said he had feelings for someone else. I sat down and the room went very still. He said Charlotte's name without flinching, which told me he had been preparing this for a while. He said he needed more. I asked him about the $12,000. He said the business was doing well and he would pay it back eventually. We never sorted the details. He was out of the apartment within a week, and within a month, he and Charlotte were photographed together at a charity event. I found the photo online at 11 at night and sat with it for a long time. I didn't cry. I just looked at it, the way you look at something you need to memorize before it goes away. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed and stared at the ceiling until the room got light. The months after Ryan left were the kind that don't make good stories because nothing dramatic happened. I went to work, came home. I ate dinner alone and watched television I didn't pay attention to. I called my sister Priya, more than I used to, and appreciated her more than I ever had. I went through all the stages, the disbelief, the sadness, the anger, the bargaining where you replay every moment looking for what you could have done differently. I did all of it quietly, in the privacy of my apartment, without making a scene or sending long messages. I was always very good at handling things quietly. Perhaps too good. The one thing I did differently was that I started working on myself in a way I had never made time for before. I started running in the mornings. I went back to a pottery class I had stopped 3 years earlier when Ryan's schedule made it complicated. I applied for a management course I had bookmarked and forgotten. I read books. I slept properly. I started to remember slowly what I felt like before I became one half of something that had stopped seeing me clearly. It was uncomfortable at first, that clarity. Like stepping into a room where all the lights are suddenly on. The invitation arrived by accident. Ryan's mother, Diane, who had never quite warmed to Charlotte despite trying, had stayed in careful contact with me since the breakup. She called every few weeks, always a little guilty, always apologetic without saying what for. She sent the engagement party invitation to my old address by mistake, the apartment Ryan and I had shared, and the new tenant forwarded it thinking it might be important. I stood in my hallway holding the thick cream envelope, looking at the gold-edged card inside. Ryan and Charlotte's engagement party. A rooftop venue in the city center. Cocktail dress. RSVP by the 15th. I don't know why I went. I've thought about that decision many times and still can't give a clean answer. Part of it was stubbornness. Part of it was something harder to name. A need to stand in the room where I had been erased and remind myself that I was still real. Part of it, honestly, was that Michael would be there. Ryan's business partner. The one person in Ryan's professional world who had always treated me like I mattered. I texted Michael before I RSVP'd. He replied in 4 words. You should come. Really. The venue was everything I expected and nothing I was ready for. It occupied the top floor of a glass building in the city, open on 3 sides, string lights threaded between iron railings, white orchids on every table. The kind of place that says money in a whisper rather than a shout. I arrived deliberately late, dressed in a deep green dress I had bought 3 weeks before without Ryan anywhere in my mind. I had done my hair the way I liked it, not the way Ryan had always suggested. Small things. They mattered. People noticed me as I came in. Some smiled the careful smiles of people who don't know which side they're supposed to be on. Some looked away, pretending they hadn't seen me arrive. Old mutual friends, people I had cooked dinner for, whose birthdays I had remembered, suddenly found reasons to study their drink glasses. I was used to that. Being erased is a slow process. By the time you notice it, most of the work is done. I got a glass of water and stood near the edge of the space where the lights were low and the view of the city was wide below. I told myself I could leave whenever I wanted. That helped more than it should have. I saw Ryan before he saw me, which gave me a few seconds to prepare. He was standing near the bar with Charlotte on his arm, both of them glowing the way new couples do when the whole world is watching. He was wearing a suit I didn't recognize. For 9 years I had known every suit he owned, and the unfamiliar cut landed strangely. Charlotte's ring caught the light every time she moved her hand, which was often. She wore it the way people wear things they want noticed, deliberately, constantly. She was beautiful in a way that was difficult to argue with. I didn't try. Ryan saw me about 20 minutes after I arrived. His expression moved through surprise, discomfort, and then something resembling guilt before he arranged his face into polite neutrality. He gave a small nod in my direction. That was all. 9 years, and I received a small nod. Charlotte followed his gaze, saw me, and smiled the kind of smile that is not a smile at all. I held her eye for exactly 3 seconds and then looked back at the city below. I was still there. I was still real. And the woman standing at that railing, holding her water glass, was someone neither of them had quite accounted for. Michael found me within half an hour of arriving. He was always like that, the person in a room who actually noticed where people were standing. He was Ryan's business partner since the early days, though he came from a different world. He had money when Ryan didn't, but never made Ryan feel small for it, which was a quality I had always respected. He touched my elbow lightly as he came to stand beside me. You look well, he said, and I could tell he meant it. I told him he looked the same as always, which was true. Michael had a steadiness that didn't change with rooms or seasons. He asked if I was all right. I said I was, and for the first time that evening it felt completely true. We talked quietly about things that had nothing to do with Ryan. My pottery class, a book he had been reading, a news story we had both followed. It was the most normal conversation I'd had in months. Michael had always been kind in the way real kindness works, without making a performance of it, without needing credit. He asked, just before the speeches started, whether I wanted to leave. Said no. I said I was staying. He nodded, unsurprised, and stayed beside me. The speeches began just after 9. Someone tapped a microphone, the music softened, and the crowd gathered around the low stage near the bar. Ryan stepped up with the practiced confidence of a man who had done many presentations. Charlotte stood to the side, wine glass in hand, radiating the satisfaction of someone who has gotten what they wanted and wants you to know it. I moved toward the edge of the group, calculating the path to the exit. Then a woman beside me, one of Charlotte's friends, touched my arm and said brightly, "You should stay for this. He's a wonderful speaker." She had no idea who I was. I stayed. Ryan's speech started warmly. Gratitude to guests, a compliment to the venue, a line about Charlotte that made the crowd coo. He was smooth. Always smooth. I watched him work the room and felt something unexpected. A deep, clear-eyed calm. I was not the same woman who had sat across from him at a kitchen table while he said I need more. I was someone else now. Someone standing in a well-lit room with good posture and nowhere she needed to run. I had survived the leaving. I had survived the months after. Could survive a speech. Then Ryan said it. It came midway through. Slipped in between two other lines like it was nothing. He talked about his journey, the hustle, the growth, the difficult decisions. Then he said, with a comfortable smile, that success meant learning to outgrow the things that held you back. People and places that kept you small. He said it lightly, like a general truth. But several heads turned toward me. Not everyone, maybe 8 or 10 people who knew enough history to understand what the sentence was really doing. I felt heat rise to my face. Kept my expression still. Charlotte, just behind Ryan's shoulder, caught my eye over the rim of her wine glass and said, clearly enough to carry, "Some people just don't level up." A ripple of laughter moved through the closer guests. The uncertain kind. The kind people produce when they're not sure if something is funny or cruel but want to seem in on it anyway. I stood completely still. My hands were steady. Inside, something that had been soft and uncertain about this evening became hard and clear. I thought about $12,000. I thought about 2 years without new clothes. I thought about every quiet Sunday I had given away without a second thought. I was going to leave. I had made the decision. I set my water glass down, picked up my bag, and took 2 steps toward the exit. I had nothing to prove. I had come, I had seen, I had survived, and that was enough. But then Michael's voice cut through the room. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. He spoke in the measured, certain tone of a man who chooses words carefully and means everyone. "That's an interesting thing to say," he said from near the edge of the crowd. "Growth." Ryan turned. The smile on his face became confused. Michael continued, still calm. "It's interesting how some people talk about outgrowing others, without mentioning who built the ground they're standing on." The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of an attentive audience, but the sharp, breathless quiet of a room that understands something is happening that wasn't on the program. I stopped walking. Turned back. Michael was looking at Ryan, not at me, not at the crowd. Just at Ryan. His expression was not angry. It was colder than anger. It was the look of someone who has stayed quiet for too long and has finally decided the silence costs more than the speaking. Ryan's expression shifted quickly. Confusion, irritation, then the start of a smile meant to smooth things over. He said, "Michael," in a tone that was both warning and appeal. Michael did not respond to the tone. He took 1 step forward, which in a silent room felt enormous. When Ryan started this business, he had an idea and no money. He had a partner who believed in him completely. She gave him her savings. $12,000. No contract. No interest. Just trust. He didn't look at me. The room already knew where to look. I stood completely still. He built his first client list on late nights. She stayed up helping him refine pitches. His first office lease was signed the month after she picked up extra work to cover their rent. Michael's voice was level. Not performing. Just stating facts the way you state things you have watched happen with your own eyes and never forgotten. "So when we talk about outgrowing things," he said, "I think we should be precise about what that means." The room was absolutely silent. Charlotte's glass was still. Ryan's face had gone the particular shade of a man who has been found out in public and has no prepared response. The silence lasted long enough to be its own verdict. Then it broke with the soft sounds of discomfort. A cleared throat, weight shifting foot to foot, a glass set down too carefully. Ryan tried to recover. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Charlotte, who was no longer smiling. Her confidence had contracted into something tight and uncertain. She looked at Ryan like she was waiting for him to fix it. Ryan had no idea how. I watched him search for words and come up empty, and it was the first time I had ever seen that happen. It felt less satisfying than I expected. Mostly it just felt true. This was who he was underneath the suit and the speech. A man who had rewritten his own history and was surprised when someone who remembered the original walked into the room. I looked at Michael. He was not looking at me with pity or satisfaction. He was simply looking at me the way you look at someone you respect without needing to announce it. I gave him the smallest nod I could manage. He gave one back. That exchange, quiet, private, 2 seconds long, felt more real than anything else that had happened in that room all evening. I didn't stay to watch the rest unravel. That was never why I came. I picked up my bag and walked toward the exit, calmly, without hurrying, without looking back. Someone touched my arm as I passed, an older woman who said quietly, "Good for you." I didn't stop. Kept walking. The lift doors opened and I stepped inside and watched the party shrink behind the closing gap. In the steel reflection I looked at myself. My hair was still how I had styled it. My dress was still the deep green the first had chosen without anyone's opinion. I looked like a person who had walked into a room and walked out again with everything she arrived with, and maybe something more. The lobby was cool and quiet. A doorman held the door and I stepped out into the city evening. The air was sharp and clean after the warmth of the rooftop. I stood on the pavement and breathed. Just breathe. No performance, no audience, no one to be strong for. Then I walked to where I had parked, got in, and drove home without the radio. The city moved past the windows and I let it. And by the time I reached my street I felt something I hadn't in a very long time. Settled. Priya called before I had taken my shoes off. Someone at the party had already messaged someone who knew her. And the story was spreading. I sat on the edge of my bed and told her everything while I unpinned my hair. She went quiet when I got to Michael. Then she said, "Emily." He said all of that in front of everyone. Told her yes. She was quiet again. Then she said, "Good," in the firm, final way she said things when nothing else needed adding. We talked for another half hour. How I felt, what came next, the fact that I had walked in and walked out without breaking down once in public, which Priya considered a personal victory on my behalf. I didn't tell her the hardest moment hadn't been the speech or Charlotte's comment. It had been Ryan's small nod when he first saw me arrive. 9 years, and that was all that remained of it. But by the time I was in bed with the lights off, I realized I wasn't thinking about the nod. I was thinking about the drive home. The quiet. How complete it had felt. How entirely mine. I fell asleep faster than I had in months, and I didn't dream about any of it. The clip appeared online the next morning. Someone had recorded Michael's speech. Not all of it, just about 40 seconds from "Who built the ground they're standing on" to the moment the room went silent. Spread quickly. By afternoon it had thousands of views. The comments were almost entirely on Michael's side, and by extension on mine, though most people didn't know my name. People wrote things like "This is what accountability looks like and she deserved better from day one." Some wrote longer comments about their own versions of the story. Partners invested in, people built up, relationships where everything was given and the giving was no longer needed once success arrived. I read the comments longer than was probably healthy, but there was something in them I needed. A confirmation that what happened to me had a name and a shape, and that others had survived their version of it. I didn't share the clip. I didn't comment. I let it exist out there doing what it was going to do, while I got ready for work in an apartment that felt increasingly like mine. Not the leftover space of something that used to be ours, but a place I had chosen and kept and made into something real. Ryan called 3 days later. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was carefully worded, apologetic in tone without containing a real apology, explanatory in the way that is really a form of self-defense. He said the party had gone differently than planned. He said some things had been said that he wanted to address. He said he hoped I was well and perhaps we could talk. I listened once and deleted it. Priya called that same evening asking if I had heard from him. I told her about the voicemail. She asked what I was going to do. I said nothing. She said, "Good." She kept saying that word like a period at the end of every sentence. Charlotte and Ryan's engagement had gone quiet on social media, which I noticed without searching for it. Mutual friends had stopped posting about them. The rooftop party, photographed lavishly going in, produced very few outgoing images. The kind of event everyone documents until something happens and nobody wants a record. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired in the good way, the way you feel after finishing something that went on too long. Clean tired. The kind that lets you sleep. 3 months after the party, I launched my own business. It had been building in the background for nearly a year, a project management consultancy for small businesses and non-profits that needed structure but couldn't afford large firms. The same gap Ryan's business had once filled, but different clients, different approach, different foundation entirely. Priya helped with the branding. My colleague Tessa came on as my first associate. I used money I had saved and a small loan I applied for in my own name, with my own documents. I registered the company on a Tuesday morning at my desk, and when the confirmation came through on my laptop, I sat back and looked at it for a long time. There was no one to kiss or celebrate with over takeout. No shared moment across a kitchen table. Just me in my apartment, with my name on something that was entirely mine. I poured a glass of juice. I had stopped drinking alcohol as part of the morning running habit, and I held it up in a small, private toast. To whatever came next. To the ground I was standing on. I had cleared that ground myself, stone by stone, in the months since the leaving. And it held well. Ryan showed up on a Sunday evening in spring, 5 months after the party. I was making dinner when the buzzer went. I checked the intercom screen and saw him in the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. I stood in my kitchen for 30 seconds before pressing the button. Not because I was undecided, but because I wanted to be deliberate. He looked tired when I opened the door. He looked like someone who had rehearsed a conversation and suddenly understood that rehearsal could not prepare you for the actual moment. He said my name. Said hello. I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway of my apartment, my name on the lease, my things behind me, and waited. He said he had been thinking. He said the party had made him see things he should have seen earlier. He said he missed me. He mentioned that Charlotte and he had separated 2 months ago, which I already knew through the quiet gossip that moves between people who once shared a couple as mutual friends. He said he thought he had made a mistake. He asked carefully if there was any possibility of a second chance. His voice was steady but his eyes were not. I let him finish. I had always been good at listening, probably too good, and I let him say everything without interrupting. When he finished, the hallway was quiet and dinner was drifting from the kitchen and a car passed slowly outside. I thought about the woman who had stood in this building's lobby 9 years ago, moving boxes in with Ryan, laughing because they had dropped a lamp on the stairs and it hadn't broken. I thought about the Thursday in October when he made tea because he needed something to hold. I thought about the small nod at the party, about Charlotte's smirk, about Michael's voice cutting clean through polite silence. And I thought about the Tuesday my company registration came through, and I sat alone feeling more complete than I had in years. I looked at Ryan. He was the same person. The face I had known for 9 years. The hands I had held across 1,000 ordinary evenings. And I felt, not hatred, not bitterness, not even satisfaction at his being here looking diminished. I felt the quietest, cleanest kind of sadness. The kind that comes when something is genuinely finished and you finally know it all the way through your body, not just your mind. I told him the truth. Not cruelly, not with performance, just cleanly. I had no second chance to give, not because of anger, not because of Charlotte, but because I had spent the past year becoming someone new and that person had no room for going backward. I told him what he had done hadn't destroyed me. It had, the way hard things sometimes do, made me find ground I didn't know was there. I told him I hoped he found what he was looking for, and I meant it. Not warmly but honestly, the way you wish things for people who have stopped being your concern. He nodded. He looked at the floor. He said he was sorry and I believed he was. I said I accepted it. Then I said good night and closed the door. I stood in the hallway with one hand on the doorknob, listening to his footsteps move away down the corridor. Then I went back to the kitchen and finished making dinner. My name was on the company. The ground was mine. And the woman in that kitchen, the one who had given everything and asked for so little, had finally stopped waiting for someone else to confirm her worth. She already knew it. She had known for some time.